there could be a decision you make that isn't the optimal decision when all is said and done. But if it helped you with how your mental view of finance and money and how this whole crypto thing works, if it helps you sleep better at night, then it is actually the best for you. We have been talking about getting back to the basics of HEX staking now for a few weeks, whether that's on Ethereum, whether that's on PulseChain. Everybody has got the shiny new toy syndrome, understandably so. I'm not blaming anybody with PulseChain and with PulseX and all these things. And a lot of people are forgetting about HEX. I think the further we get into this market and when newer participants come that, again, as we said earlier, didn't even know what HEX was to begin with, let alone PulseChain or PulseX. HEX is still the awesome thing that Richard created that was really a first when it came to crypto, like the first ever CD, creating a CD ladder and earning this kind of crazy yield by just minting your own tokens. I mean, there's nothing that's been made as good as the HEX smart contract. So we have, and we can first talk about like if somebody were being onboarded, which may be the best one to get into. But the main purpose of my conversation here was, you know, you can stake HEX out to 5,555 days. That's about 15 years. Some people are all about that. Some people, there's been growing narrative from, and everybody's different, and that it's not a one size fits all thing here. But people have been talking about shorter stakes recently with a bigger principal because prices are so low. You're able to pick up a lot of HEX now and a lot of T shares. There's also the idea of cycle top timing your stakes where, okay, well, if you think this bull cycle is going to kind of be wrapping up or at a fever pitch in like the fall of 2025, maybe sprinkle some stakes to come to an end at that time. And then there's just the idea, I mean, some people just don't even want to stake. Like some people, and this may be some of the new ones that don't really understand HEX, they may not even want to do it all together and just want to be liquid and wait till we're kind of in that section where we're at the top of the bull cycle, sell, buy back in when we're at an 80+% dip or whatever it may be. This conversation, shout out to Corey Geary and Money Talks with Dane. I saw them having this conversation the other day. I thought it was riveting. Those two guys, there's an example of a couple of guys. They have less subs than us. Usually we're talking about somebody who has more than us. Corey Geary and Money Talks with Dane, they do like streams together a couple of days a week. It's two separate channels. But check those guys out because Corey Geary, they're also real estate investors. I like their whole setup. They talk about crypto as the means to initially build the wealth over the next decade and then real estate as a way to preserve it, which I think is a great idea. I mean, it's really what I've kind of been thinking about doing as well. But they had a great conversation about this the other day and not doing 15-year stakes, more so trying to just time it because HEX has gone down 99%. There was, of course, a stock split in this scenario as well. But yeah, there's people kind of against doing the longer term stakes. I know not a lot of people, some people don't like B Roots in this community, but he also has talked about, he doesn't even think, what if HEX isn't even that relevant in 15 years? So first off, I want to ask you, Ewok, in terms of somebody new, like if you were helping somebody new come to HEX, would you rather get them on Ethereum or PulseChain, and why? If not, or both, whatever it might be to you. And then we'll get into kind of like the game theory of the actual stakes here.
Well, for somebody new, I think it really depends on how much they're putting in. Everybody's going to be different. It's, you know, there, like you said, there is no one size fits all kind of solution for this. I think people should have exposure to both, especially coming in now. You know, a lot of people that came in before that we onboarded do have exposure to both because of the copy that they got. Right now, though, if they're only putting in $100 or $200 or something like that, PulseChain may be the right answer. Only because the fees, you know, we don't want to eat them up. I was looking at the gas fees earlier and they're back up around 45 or 50. Yep. 48 right now. So I don't think that it makes sense to have somebody lose a fourth of what they're trying to invest in fees. Doesn't give them the best example. or the best experience, I should say, for their first time. It's kind of intimidating when you have to blow that much on fees. So for a newer person with a smaller amount, yes, PulseChain. I think though, if somebody's got a larger bag to invest, you want them to experience it all. I would try to get them to look at all four, right? All of our four main things. And then as far as staking goes, again, there's no simple answer. You've got to look at what you want because there are so many options. For me, I'm laddered out 15 years. I will continue to put a new one out around the 15th of every month that comes out on the 1st of every month for 15 years because I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be like. I don't know if I'll even be alive then. I mean, I hope I am, but you just never know these things. You don't know what's going to happen, but you do want to be prepared. What if, what if Richard did this, what if he built a better Bitcoin? What if it is relevant in 15 years? What if B Roots isn't relevant next week?
Don't hate on B Roots. I just found out he was a pro wrestler for a period of time. I heard his interview with that Lit life coaching guy. He was literally in the WWE. Like in the, I don't know if he was in like NXT or if that even existed back then, but yeah, he anyway, neither here nor there, but
either way, I'm not a fan. Just because he is a moon boy. He does like to pump and dump things, and it really can get a lot of people wrecked if they're not paying attention. So I don't like that style. I would rather have somebody go long term, plan for the future, delay gratification. That's why HEX exists. And for anybody that does want to play the cycles or whatever it may be, then fine. I mean, everybody's different. So if you think that you're going to be smart and time the cycles, well, then end it at the end of this cycle, and then maybe go another 4 years after that and end it at that cycle. That's 2 cycles. I just can't see not using HEX the way it was designed. There's so many positives about it that keep you from damaging yourself. It just doesn't make sense to just hold it liquid when you could be making more of that token. And guess what? If you're making more, you're not down 99% because the amount you've earned over that time cuts into that so much. It just, again, it doesn't make sense to me to not use it the way it was designed because it is flawless in its operation. It's flawless in its execution. Holding it liquid is just diluting yourself to everybody else that is staking. So,
So I want to say I agree with you and disagree with you. And again, this is a one size fits all. So I mean, like, whether agreeing and disagreeing isn't really like a I win, you lose type of thing. Everybody's life is a little bit different. So I agree with you. Like, I do agree. Like, the staking mechanism, I think, is too good to not be used. I would not want to have just all liquid HEX. I would not be a fan of that. That said, even though you're right about like the amount of yield, depending upon how big your principal is, depending upon how long your stake is, how many T-shares it is, the amount of yield you could be getting is impactful. But I think like the opportunity cost, I don't think HEX is going to go down. Now, again, it only went down 99% on Ethereum this time because of the split. It had bottomed at 1.8 cents back in December. And I think that if there was no PulseChain, I think that would have been the bottom. We'd be looking at a 97% drop. It's maybe you could say, okay, it's still almost 99, whatever. Either way, I do think there's a huge opportunity cost at not being able to. I'm not talking about trading. I'm just talking about market cycle timing a little bit, and not even in one fell swoop. I mean, HEX was at 53 cents September of 2021, and it wasn't there long, but still, as HEX hits 30 cents, as HEX hits 40 cents, 50 cents during that time, you could have been scaling slowly, just little bits out of your position or so, to then buy back when HEX is sub 10 cents again or something like that. And you can make these parameters at the beginning. I mean, like, you should have a plan. I'm not saying that, like, I could just sit here and say like exactly what you could have done. Hindsight's 2020. You need to have that timed out. Like, to me, I would rather be buying back in the 80% plus down again in the next bear market or something. You need to have those parameters set up. And again, that's not for everybody. What you just reminded me of, Ewok, when you said it's saving yourself from yourself, and I understand that's what the point of the contract was, and 15 years and all that. It reminds me very much of the Dave Ramsey credit card argument. Okay, Dave Ramsey, love him or hate him, he talks about, like, for the average American who, let's face it, is kind of a dumbass. I mean, right. They're terrible with money, and irresponsible with credit, and yada yada yada. He is like, you shouldn't be in debt. You shouldn't have credit card. The Bible says you don't want to be in debt, and all this stuff. So I understand that for most people. Like, I understand most people shouldn't be in debt, shouldn't have credit cards. They don't know how to handle it. They're impulsive buyers, whatever. I love using credit cards. I like to leverage them. I like to get sign-on bonuses. And I never carry a balance. I should have credit cards. I think it's something similar with the staking game theory. It's like, yourself. I know my conviction level. I know I'm not a paper hand boy. I know I'm not going to sell at the bottom. So for me, if I have something liquid, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, what if I capitulate? I know I'm not going to capitulate.
Right.
I don't think I. But this is what I mean. It's a character thing. You really got to know yourself, I think. So.
Sure. And I never said 100% stake. Keep some liquid. That's perfectly fine. Set something for you if you want to keep 80-20, 80% stake, 20% liquid. That way you can catch those opportunities that, Larry J said, I'm not staked for the same reasons that you're talking about, basically. And that's the opportunity for when it does go to 30 or 50 or 70 cents or whatever it may go. If you have a little liquid, then you don't have to emergency end stake. That's something that you really don't want to do, especially during, those times. Again, though, that could be somebody else's strategy. Brazology said because he was staked, though, he had a lot of free HEX that he was able to sacrifice with. Right. So again, this is not going to be a one size fits all for anybody. And it's really going to have to be tailored to your lifestyle, your age, your exposure. There's a lot of things. If you're 65, 70 years old, then I wouldn't go 5-5-5-5. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I didn't mean that funny, but I just
thinking of an 80-year-old staking hack. I mean, I'm sure it's happened. I don't know.
I'm sure. I mean, I know HEX 19 is getting up there. He's one of our OG guys that has been in for a while. I don't know what his staking ladder looks like. I'm sure he has probably said at one point he was one of the guys that got a SIM swap and got hacked at one point for quite a bit.
Wow.
But an older gentleman, I know he's probably in his late 70s at least. So, again, you really just have to, leave a little bit on the bone. But again, that's why I said using HEX the way it was designed. If you're not doing it, it just doesn't make sense with, even if it's 50% of your bag, earn more. It definitely helps the, it helps the downswing, the downturn when you're making that much more every single day. And it's almost like DCA every single day. It's like dollar cost averaging at these low prices without really doing anything, so yeah, that's my thoughts and would be my strategy. But again, everyone's different.
Yeah, and clearly, I'm not saying don't stake at all. I'm actually very heavily staked right now. But yeah, I just mean that there's different ways to do it, and I think people have to figure out what's going to be best for them. It's not an argument where somebody's right, somebody's wrong, or anything like that, because your mind, there could be a decision you make that isn't the optimal decision when all is said and done, but if it helped you with how your mental view of finance and money and how this whole crypto thing works, if it helps you sleep better at night, then it is actually the best for you,
Yep. Yes, Ryan, that's who that was.
Yeah.
To answer your question.
But yeah, I'm definitely interested in staking HEX. I just, I understand the people that this is also going to change when your wealth changes. So like if you make it through a cycle and then if you make it through 2 cycles, you're not, I would assume you wouldn't be as eager to do 15-year stakes. You might be thinking even more short term because you go into wealth preservation mode a little bit then.
Well, and so here's something else to think about too, is if you're going to do different time frames, excuse me, I would do your shorter stakes probably on Ethereum, and your longer stakes on PulseChain. If you own both, it's just a thought, because the longer the stake is, the more calculations that have to be done, the higher the fees. So at the same time, it has to be worthwhile, that you don't want to stake so short that you're eating into your profit if the fees are that high. So, that's something else that you also want to consider. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing large amounts for shorter period of time, Ethereum side may be the better way. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's what we're going to see too. I mean, we're going to also see. We've talked about, and maybe you can pull it up on the back end, Ewok, but the payout per T share. We're going to be monitoring that as we do go, and we've been figuring that HEX on Ethereum, you are going to start getting a larger piece of that pie. If the trend continues in this direction, and so far it hasn't been anything super significant, but if that does happen, that we talked about it earlier, Randy Hilarski calling HEX the Ferrari or whatever, basically that's where the bigger spenders will go. If the payout per T share is better there, you may see that continue. So let me see what do we got there.
I'm gonna blow it up a little bit here for us.
There you go. Yeah, so it's still slightly ahead, it looks like.
Yeah, they're pretty close, but right here the HEX T share price is still what gets me. $216 for a T share on Ethereum, $407 on PulseChain, and about 35 cents on Hedron.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So
and that's that discount we said earlier. I mean, it's almost an 87% split at the current moment. So that's why I've been interested in buying HEX on Ethereum right now and staking HEX on Ethereum. So, there's so many angles now. I mean, certainly I'm with you. Obviously, you said earlier, if somebody new is coming in, I'd recommend or share what I'm doing, and that's that I'm buying all of these tokens. But the HEX staking game theory, I think we need to get more videos on this and more streams on this, and I do think that will happen again as this market goes on. The economic energy and the thoughts, I think, will start steering more towards how do I make yield in crypto and how do I stay in this for longer term, and that's going to be HEX. So
right, even our audience has different opinions too, and Briz says $100,000 worth of HEX will get you about $700 a month. And then I agree with Johnny that he says it's more for years, not months. If you can't keep a promise, don't make it, basically.
Exactly. So. And that's the whole thing. That's the great thing about the smart contract is if you did what you said you were going to do, you're going to be rewarded. If you don't, you're it's going to cost you dearly in some scenarios. And I agree with what Johnny said. I mean, months months, throw it out the window. That's like the bank X type stuff. Like I wouldn't be interested in monthly stakes, and obviously there's people that are like huge whales that do that and like to make yield for 30-day periods or whatever. But I mean, for the average buyer, you're going to be looking at like a year minimum, and then doing it off that. So even if 15 scares you too much and you can't even imagine that far in the future, just maybe go out a couple of cycles, do half of that, like go out 8 years or something, and split it up. And even to what you said earlier, Ewok, even though we know that these 4-year cycles have been very dependable and you can kind of time them and stuff like that, down to the month, you really can't. And you really, when you're starting to get like 2 cycles out, and it's like, okay, I think, probably December 2029 is when Bitcoin will be at $500,000 or whatever. And, you're likely going to be wrong. So I don't think there's a point.
For sure.
It's hard to even do the cycle thing. So that's why people do talk about having actual staking ladders annually, and just kind of going on from there. So that's kind of
Or
just the way of punting it where you can't be wrong.
yeah, or even quarterly. I mean, if you want to break them up quarterly, make sure they're worthwhile. Like, don't break it down so much that the value isn't earning enough. But quarterly is also something good, or semi-annually. That way you can kind of pick out some different times and have some things ending. And then if you miss the top or whatever, or don't need it at that point, restake it. Like, it doesn't, no one says you have to sell. And I would never sell at all. Even if you're just peeling off your yield that you made, and then putting it again back out in the future. Cause we don't know what's going to happen. And, if we treat it the way it was designed, I think you're going to have a better experience than if you just try to hold it liquid and get diluted. Just my opinion.